It can be easy to feel a little stuck during a counseling session. You're not sure what to say or what to ask next. Something that can actually be really useful in helping guide your conversation with your client is to get a sense of the primary types of counselor responses and the intention that each one of them serves. This way, if you know what you're trying to accomplish next with your response to the client, you'll also have a better idea of what type of response will help you accomplish that. There are really just 3 main intentions that you will probably have as a counselor to move the conversation forward and help your client progress in terms of making behavior changes. The first would be to acknowledge the client. And we'll take a look in a moment about what that means specifically, but this is to acknowledge who the client is, what they bring to the table, and what they're saying. The next intention is to help your client in self-exploration. And this might involve exploring a concern that has come up or digging deeper into the meaning behind a statement that the client has brought up. It's a way for the two of you to explore the topics and the ideas together. Your final intention might be to challenge your clients, to point out a discrepancy between what the client is saying and the types of behaviors the client is engaging in, or what the client says she wants and what she is willing to do. Here's a place where we can bring up ambivalence and a place where we can try to push our clients to work a little bit harder or identify that ambivalence and start moving toward change. Now you'll see that there are a lot of different types of responses that can accomplish any of these intentions. Let's look at the first type of acknowledging. Sometimes when you're acknowledging the client, your intention is primarily to make a connection with the client, to build your relationship through establishing rapport and trust. You can see here that there are seven different types of responses that can help accomplish that. Another purpose of acknowledging is just to get the client to keep on talking so that you have more information, so that the client feels comfortable to share more, because you know that there's more for the client to say and you want to draw that out. Another piece of acknowledging what the client is saying is simply to make sure that the client recognizes that you are in fact listening and understanding. You're giving your full attention to the client. So you can see here that all of these types of responses that are highlighted in each of those columns relate to just acknowledging the client, helping the client to feel empowered to say more and comfortable to open up to you. I also want to point out that some types of responses can accomplish many different intentions. So attending, which is a form of active listening, can have the effect of acknowledging the client in all of these different ways. Empathizing, which is also a form of reflective listening, can acknowledge through building relationships, getting the client to keep on talking, also demonstrate that you as a counselor are listening and engaged, but can also help the client to further explore this idea that they're talking about so that they can recognize their own change talk, so that they can determine possibly what's going on beneath the surface. This is a way of exploring because when the client hears his or her own words reflected back through your perspective, it allows the clients to think more deeply about whether that was what he or she meant. And your client may clarify or elaborate here. Either way, it's an opportunity for the two of you to explore those ideas together. You can also see that some types of statements don't bridge across all of the types of acknowledging, but they might fit some intentions of acknowledging and also other areas, such as what paraphrasing does. And then there are some that might fit the other categories, like directing, which can help a client to explore and also might help you to challenge your client. What I also want to talk about, because this seems like a lot of new terminology, but most of these responses connect back to the terms and strategies that we've already been discussing as part of motivational interviewing. First of all, questioning. Here's where we rely on micro skill number 1, our open-ended questions. So this is a strategy we've already been practicing. Respect. Certainly, we want to respect our clients. And also, we demonstrate respect through affirmations. That's not the only way, but it's one of the most typical ways that we can demonstrate that respect verbally. And it's also the strategy that best aligns with the motivational interviewing practices, and in this case, the second of our motivational interviewing micro skills. Empathizing is terminology that's used by these other authors, but it refers to reflections, which again is one of our motivational interviewing micro skills, the third one. And yes, the fourth micro skill is also here because paraphrasing is not only used this way, but it is often used when providing summaries. So you'll see all of the 4 micro skills are represented among the typical counselor responses. Partnership is something that we've talked about as being central to successful motivational interviewing. You may remember that is the P in PACE. So we've talked about this before. As a counselor response, this is just a way to state that intention of partnership and you're working together collegially, as opposed to you being the expert and the client being, a passive recipient of information. So it's just a way of stating this explicitly when we make it one of our counselor response types. Attending is another way of describing active listening strategies. We've talked about that already because that is part of the 4 processes of motivational interviewing. It's the first process, engaging with the client. We've also talked about giving advice. Only after seeking and obtaining permission, we can give advice through the elicit, provide, elicit strategy, which usually will come up in the planning phase of a counseling session. So you can see here that 7 of these 16 responses are ones that we have already talked very specifically about as part of our motivational interviewing strategies. In reality, you can probably utilize just these 7 and have very successful counseling sessions that rely on motivational interviewing practices. But you'll also see that some of these other responses are variations of the motivational interviewing ideas that we've already discussed. Some can provide additional options for you to kind of fill in the gaps in places where you might want to rely on other strategies. So I encourage you to think carefully as you review the rest of the lesson about how you might utilize any of these 16 responses as part of your counseling sessions. And I also encourage you just to think about when I get stuck and want to accomplish A, B, or C, acknowledge, explore, or challenge. These are some ideas for the types of statements or questions that I can utilize in that moment to keep the conversation moving forward and at the same time accomplish specifically what I am trying to do, whether it's to acknowledge the client, explore the client's ideas or experiences, or to challenge the clients to move forward, to set a goal, to work through ambivalence, etc. I hope you find these counseling response explanations helpful, and I look forward to hearing about how you're utilizing them in your future counseling sessions.